Let's dig right into this. Now, let's begin by imagining a solar eclipse that occurs when you are looking at the sun and the moon. Well, it literally gets in between you and the sun. And so you can no longer see the sun because the moon is in the way. The sun and the moon and you, all three are in perfect alignment. So again, the sun is totally blocked. Now, with that thought in mind, here is the analogy. The sun represents reality, and the moon represents your thinking. So I call this a psychological or a mental eclipse. The objective, from your perspective, is to get your thinking in line with reality. Get the moon in line with the sun. So it's not that reality disappears, it's still there. Obviously the sun didn't go away, but your thinking is in line with reality. And I find that one of the reasons that many people with Asperger syndrome become depressed and frustrated is because they don't have a psychological eclipse. They don't have this mental eclipse. Their thinking is not in line with reality. Their moon is not in line with the sun. So we need to work towards discovering, first of all, what is really reality, and that's the hard part because of confirmation bias. So the very first thing that we say causes depression in people with Asperger's is they miss the eclipse. Have you ever read in the paper, there's going to be a solar eclipse, and you say, man, I want to see that, then you forget about it. Most people don't do that, but yeah, I've done it a few times. You miss the eclipse. But from our perspective, we cause the eclipse. So we miss it because we didn't do it. So we need to cause this eclipse. Don't miss it, but align your thinking with reality. By the way, that's not just an Asperger's thing, an Aspies thing. That's a people thing. A lot of people don't have their thinking aligned with reality, and they go off in all kinds of directions. Now, I'm pushing my 70th birthday. I tell people that I'm 68 years old, 68 and a half. And then I tell them that I would be 69, but I was sick a year. Whatever. All right, now, so I've learned a thing or two over these 70 years, nearly 70 years. Preschool, I had Asperger syndrome because I believe it's innate. I believe it's inherited. I believe it's biological, pathological. Early days in elementary school, then into what we used to call junior high, they now call it middle school. I went through all of that as a person with Asperger syndrome again in high school, college, adulthood, and now in my senior years. The reason I say that is because I've seen a thing or two, and so I've learned a thing or two, and I want to share that with you. Now, I'm not saying that you should never talk to a therapist because, hey, therapists, they're trained. Many of them are trained properly. Some of them not, but many of them are trained properly to help you through your journey. But there's something that many therapists are missing. And no, I'm not critical of therapists. Well, some I am, but in general, no. And that is many of them just don't have the experience. They're not Aspies. They don't have Asperger syndrome. So as they are counseling you and helping you, and many of them do help as they counsel, but they're still missing that experience component. They really can't put themselves in your shoes through true empathy is something we're going to talk about in just a moment. And so sometimes you need somebody who's actually been there. And I don't know too many people on YouTube who are pushing 70 years old, seniors, who are talking about this. Maybe I may be the only one. I don't know. So number one is this. We miss the eclipse. Let me reiterate, because this is so important. We need to align our thinking with reality. And when we don't do that, we trigger often depression. We become frustrated. And so we've got to have this mindset that, well, in nature, you know, we don't cause the eclipse, but as people, psychological eclipse, yeah, that's something that we can actually manipulate. So we don't have to miss it. We just need to find out what reality is. Again, hard thing to do. Sometimes and align our thinking with reality, and then we won't have those disappointments. Talk about that in just a second. Number two, because we miss the eclipse, we have what I call unaligned expectations. Now, our objectives as sane and centered humans is to align our expectations again with reality, not just our thinking, but our expectations, our anticipations, what we think is going to happen, what we think should be happening in the present. So failure to do so inevitably leads to disappointment. Now let's stop and think about that word, disappointment. Two parts to it. First part is dis, and the second part is appointment. Have you ever missed an appointment? I missed a few. I recall one time I had a doctor's appointment, and this is back when I had my business, and I said, man, I need to get to the doctor. And so I left the office, and I got in my car, and I went home. I don't know what happened. I just forgot, and I missed my appointment, and the doctor, needless to say, was disappointed. So I missed my appointment, and the doctor was disappointed because he expected me to be there at a specific time and in his office, a specific place. All right, so the prefix dis, D-I-S, that comes from a Latin word that roughly means apart. So we have these mental appointments, expectations, and we miss them because we get in our car and go home. Because we go in a different direction. That is to say, maybe not physically, but our minds are going somewhere else. So we need to align our appointments so that they are not missed appointments and they are not dissed appointments. And the point of talking about appointments is so that we have anticipation, that we have expectations that are aligned with the sun, that our moon is aligned with the sun, that our thinking, our expectations are aligned with reality, and this is what we can really expect to happen. And so if the doctor expected me to miss my appointment, he would not have been disappointed. He would say, well, that's Ken. You know, sometimes he comes, sometimes he doesn't show up. He would probably cut me out of his practice if I did that all the time, but as people with Asperger syndrome, we seem to have this difficulty anticipating and expecting things that just do not fit reality. So, what is reality? There are what? I think 7.8 or 8 billion people on the planet right now. Did you know that we talk about people with Asperger's have specific traits? Well, every human being on the planet, all 8 billion of us, have traits of one kind or another. Now, there is one trait that virtually every human has to one degree or another, and we're going to talk about that in a little more detail in just a second, but there is one trait that every human being seems to have. And that is the trait that they don't care. I call this, lack of a better term, the I don't give a rat's rump trait. They just don't care. So we have this expectation that people should care about us because we have Asperger syndrome. We are autistic. We are on the spectrum. Well, they're on the spectrum too. They're on the I don't give a rat's rump spectrum. And if we don't recognize that, we're going to be disappointed. And our moon and sun are not going to align. We're going to have not going to have a psychological alignment, we're not going to have a mental eclipse. So we need to understand, hey, people just don't care. Now, if you stop and think about it, how many people do you know? I mean, of the 8 billion people on the planet, how many of them do you actually know? Most people, I think, know somewhere around 100 or 200 individuals by name. You see them, you know who they are, you recognize them. The rest of them, you know they're there because you see them on television. So that, you know, you see them in a crowd. You go to the city, whatever, you see them. Football game, hey man, look, there's thousands of them. But you don't know those people. You can't possibly conceivably care about every single one of those individuals. And by the same token, we can't expect all of those individuals to care about us. That is a false expectation. That is something that we need to learn that is not in alignment with reality. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't care. I'm not saying that we shouldn't expect people to care, but to expect people to care all the time, all people, all the time, you know what? That's way out of line with reality. Number 3 is this. Okay, number 1 was we miss the eclipse. Number 2 is we have unaligned expectations. And number 3 is we make what I call should statements. People should be more considerate. Yeah, they should. But guess what? Reality is they're not. People should be more understanding. Yes, they should, but they're not. People should be more giving. Yes, they should, but they're not. So we make these should statements that are not in line with reality. So just because people should do it doesn't mean we should anticipate it. Doesn't mean that we should expect it. And if we do anticipate and expect everyone to feel sorry for us or to be supportive because we have Asperger syndrome or we're on the spectrum, autism spectrum, we're going to be, what is the word again? Disappointed. We're not going to have that alignment. All right, number 4 is this. We tend to, and this is a big deal, you got to listen to this because it's so very important. We tend to use ourselves as standards for others. That is to say, I will use myself as a standard for other people. So we need to admit the fact that if you have Asperger syndrome, chances are you are an empath. It's important to point out that there are 2 distinct types of empathy. Both are empathy, but they're different types. One is cognitive empathy and the other is affective empathy. Now, some psychologists say there's more than just these 2. But by and large, there are 2 types of empathy, cognitive and affective. People with Asperger's tend to be very strong in affective empathy, whereas they are very shallow in cognitive empathy. By that I mean, if you have Asperger's syndrome and you see somebody sitting alone, you kind of feel sorry for them because you know what that's like. You have walked a mile, well, you've walked a lifetime in their shoes. And so you have empathy for that person. You have affective empathy for that person. But cognitive empathy is something that is very prevalent in psychopaths. And on this channel, we talk about both things. We talk about autism, Asperger syndrome, and we talk a lot about psychopaths specifically. We talk about individuals who are have this trait where they are very selfish and self-centered. We call that narcissism or a covert narcissism. Talk about both things on this channel because they are interrelated. They're intertwined. A lot of people don't recognize that, and that's cognitive empathy. We don't recognize. So we are easily, as people with Asperger syndrome, we're easily fooled. Very easily fooled. We can be very naive. We'll believe anything. Again, we think the car salesman actually likes us. We think the waitress is really, really friendly and she must be our friend. Then after we pay the bill, leave the tip, all of a sudden our friend is gone. She don't want to talk to us anymore. And we wonder what happens. We don't understand because we lack that cognitive empathy that, she wasn't really our friend. Now, a person who is a narcissist, they zoom in on that. They can pick up on that very, very easily. They immediately know that you are naive. They know that you're gullible. By the way, did you know the word gullible is not in the dictionary? Yeah, look it up. We have affective empathy. Okay, here's a test. Now, you may have done this before, but imagine that you are driving down a country road, two-lane country road, and you see a turtle in the middle of the road. Now, the turtle is trying to cross the road. You see that. And so you have empathy for that turtle, affective empathy. So you pull your car over if it's safe to do so, and I've done this several times, and you pick up the turtle and you put it at the side of the road so it doesn't get run over. Okay, I just thought of a joke. Are you ready? Why did the turtle cross the road? Because it's not a chicken. I didn't say it was a funny joke. I just said it was a joke. All right, but I've done that before. And when my grandkids were little, sometimes I'd take the turtle home, and we would keep it for a day or two, and then we'd take it back out in the wild. That is what we're talking about when we say affective empathy. We need to understand, as we are aligning reality, our moon with the sun, we need to understand that most humans do not possess our level of empathy. Most people do not possess your level as an empath, your level of affective empathy. But we expect them to, because it's very natural to us, and we expect other people to be like us, to think like us. But they don't. And when we have those anticipations, those expectations, again, we're disappointed. And that can trigger depression. What to do? Well, what to do is kind of simple. Just acknowledge the fact that most people don't have our level of empathy. They just don't. Don't expect it. Number 5 is this: excessive feelings of entitlement. Now, I got to hasten to say, I got to say this very emphatically, that I think all humans are entitled to a level of compassion. Doesn't mean we're going to get it, but I think we're entitled to it. So when I say excessive feelings of entitlement, I'm not saying that we should have no concern for other people whatsoever. Yeah, absolutely we should, but there's that should statement. It doesn't always happen the way we think it should happen. Most people, for example, well, let me frame this as a question. Do you know what Williams syndrome is? Most people have no idea. Most people have no idea what Asperger syndrome is. I mean, for years. I've had it since before I was born. I didn't even know what it was. Didn't know I had it. But as I learned and educated myself, I discovered, hey, the traits of Asperger syndrome, of autism, I see those so obvious in me. So after a lot of study, I finally went to a therapist and I said, I want to know, am I on the spectrum? And after a few counseling sessions, okay, she just kind of checked all the check marks. I mean, just boom, right down the line. You have Asperger syndrome. You are definitely on the autism spectrum. So the reason I say that is just like we may not know what Williams syndrome is. Most people have no idea what Asperger syndrome is. So how can we expect to have that feeling of entitlement when most people don't even know what it is? They just think we're aloof, or they think we're quiet or shy, or we're space aliens. They don't know. So when we have these excessive feelings of entitlement, we're going to be disappointed, and that's going to trigger depression. Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't lobby the government, lobby schools, whatever, so that people with autism will be taken care of. Yeah, we should do that. But that excessive feeling that everywhere we go, people should just sense that we have autism. They should just sense that we have Asperger syndrome. Disappointment, that's what's going to happen and trigger depression because not reality, your sun and moon are not in line. Number 6 is we take too little self-responsibility. Okay, alignment again is most people don't even know that we have, they don't even know what Asperger syndrome is, let alone that we have it. They don't understand why we behave or don't behave in a certain way. They have no idea. Because of that, it is so important that we learn to assume responsibility for ourselves. Well, how do you do that? Well, you evaluate your aptitude. What is it you can and cannot do? And then you operate within your aptitude. And if there's something you can't do, that's when you try to get help. Now, I can give you a couple good examples of this. There's a reason why I did not go to medical school and become a brain surgeon. It's not because I don't like the money those guys make, but I just don't have the aptitude. Now, I would really love to have been an NBA star, National Basketball Association. I'd love to have made $1 million a month for a few years and then retire in a big mansion somewhere. Well, the problem with that is I don't have the aptitude to play basketball. And folks, look, when you live in Indiana, where it's a state law that every new home that is built has to have a basketball goal in the driveway. Okay, I'm exaggerating, but yeah, this is a basketball state. You know, it's bad enough to have Asperger syndrome, but to have Asperger syndrome and you can't play basketball and you live in Indiana, talk about trigger depression. Well, you know, you just acknowledge the fact, I don't have the aptitude, I just can't do it. You know, I can dribble a basketball, I can run, I just can't do both of them at the same time. So you are who you are. There's nothing wrong with you. Everybody is on a spectrum of some kind or another. And when we compare ourselves with other people, we're making a huge mistake. So what you need to do, what I need to do, what we all need to do is compare ourselves with ourselves. Not with everybody else, because if you compare yourself with everybody else, one or two things going to happen. You're either going to think you're better than everyone else, or you're going to think everyone else is better than you. And neither one of those are good positions to be in. Go sit in a shopping mall sometime, if you can find one that's still open. Sit in a shopping mall sometime and just watch people go by. And notice how many of them, I probably shouldn't say this, but notice how many of them are ugly. Okay, I said it. And here you are feeling, oh, I'm so ugly. Well, guess what? You're on the ugly spectrum. And there's a lot of people uglier than you. Okay, there's a lot of people better looking than you. A lot of people more fit than we are. A lot of people out of shape, worse than we are. We're on the spectrum like everybody else. But this thing about comparing ourselves with other people and then feeling either superior or inferior, that's not aligning our thoughts with reality. So, one more time. Align your thoughts with reality. Get that psychological alignment of your sun and the moon, your thinking with reality. Get your psychological eclipse in place.